All right. Hello and welcome to Connect with Adult Ed. My name is Nadia Cater. I am your host, and today we have a very special episode. Joining me today, of course, my co-host, Jamie Trujillo.
Hello,
Hey,
everybody.
yeah. So we haven't done a lot of episodes like this. We're having a group episodes or a group discussion with our fellow Propel employees. So I'm just going to ask you guys just one by one, just to say your name and your general focus area of the work that you do with Propel. Don, why don't you go ahead? You start us off.
Don Dutton is my name. Passionate about ESL, and it's a good thing. I am the manager of the ESL team here in Propel. Peggy, how about you?
Hello, I'm Peggy Garcia Marquez, and for the last couple of years, I have been focusing on training a coach approach for use in adult education. And Carrie?
Hey, I'm Carrie Morgan Canella. I'm the Propel Literacy Coordinator, so my focus and passion is on literacy, adult literacy, both ESL and basic literacy. Nina.
Hi, I'm Nina. I work on the Teaching Skills That Matter Essentials team and also IET, Integrated Education and Training for Propel.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, so like I said, we only have a couple of episodes where there's just more than 3 or even 4 people. So right now, including me and Jamie, we have 6. I said this was a special episode, and I didn't even talk about that yet. So our special episode is we tried a new professional learning project within Propel. So it was a professional learning for us, the professional learning providers. So, Jamie, why don't you just walk us through just really quick of just like what we did exactly? What does it mean to be in a professional learning book club?
Sure. So, Nadia, as you said, we decided to try something new. This was the first time that we tried out a formal book club. We chose a book together that we were going to read. It was the PD book. And we met every month and discussed a different chapter. And we had one person from the book group volunteer for that particular chapter. That person would decide on the questions, which usually came from the book. The book did provide the questions usually. And so that person would facilitate the discussion. And we would get through as many of the questions that we could in the hour time span that we had. And so, as I said, every month we would discuss a different chapter all the way through the end. And I know that we're going to talk about this later on in the episode, but then after that, we decided what we were going to do with that information and just with the experience that we had with the book club. So it took us, I want to say, about 10 months total to complete all the chapters plus that final meeting where we talked about next steps and action plans. And so it was took the better part of a fiscal year to get through this project. But yeah, that is in a nutshell what we did.
Thank you. That was pretty succinct. Yeah, and just to remind, the book that we read was the PD book, 7 Habits That Transform Professional Development by Lori Cohen and Elena Aguilar. We chose this book because 2 of the participants in the book club were already familiar with it and got some really good tools. And we thought, why not do this as a group? Because usually or previously we have done professional development mostly as professional developers on an individual basis, but never like all together. So this was an experiment to test out this format because at Propel, we're always looking for new frames for professional learning, really new ways of doing things, essentially. So we compiled these questions together. We have our group here, and we're just going to sort of jump in, and I'm going to try my best to let other people talk because I do love talking. That's why this is part of my job. to be a podcast host. So I'm going to jump in with the first question. How did the book club work within the organization's overall structure? So we're talking about our jobs, Propel.
I thought it worked really well, especially as a team of professional developers. We all value professional learning. And like Nadia said, we want to do it in different ways, and we need to do it ourselves as well. And was a way to do that. And we kept it completely optional. So it wasn't required or anything. People just joined who wanted to join. Like Jamie said, we met monthly, but of course the reading time was on everyone's own schedule. So it was flexible in that way. There did need to be some kind of a lead to start with. So Nadia and Propel coordinator Rebecca Sherry created a planning template and then started us off. But like Jamie mentioned, it was great after that because everybody took turns facilitating the discussions. So everybody was able to really participate and take the discussions wherever they went, which was a lot of different places.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If anyone has anything to add to what Carrie said, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next question.
I thought that format worked very well as I was the first person to do it for our first meeting. I was the moderator for the first meeting. I was a little bit nervous about how it would go, but that structure we had in place really helped a lot. And then it worked, I think, well for each person who facilitated the meeting after that.
We took notes on the meetings as well as the questions. The facilitators generally did, or somebody else helped with that. And I think that was really helpful too, because by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, what did we talk about back then? So just following up on what Dawn said, having that structure of also capturing what we talked about was great.
Yeah, as far as the notes are concerned, not everybody could make all the meetings. I don't know if anybody was able to make every single meeting. So those notes really helped when, I couldn't attend a meeting. I was able to catch up just by looking at that. And so, there wasn't that pressure to make sure that you could attend every single meeting, which I appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so our next question was, what were some challenges with the book club format?
Well, I think that one of the challenge for me is just what we were talking about is only meeting once a month. But I think it's important to note about the people who work in Propel all work in different areas. So we mostly meet online, and I kind of work kind of like on an island by myself, I feel a lot of times. I'm retired, and so I work as a consultant for Propel. Other people work for Propel full time. Other people have full time jobs and work part time for Propel. So, really finding the time to really spend together and learn together and get to know each other in a different way where there's not just like a meeting agenda and we have to get things done was really beneficial for me. And I know, but it was also a challenge for me because I sat down and I read this book in 2 days. And so every month when we were going to book club, I had to reread the chapter because I couldn't remember 9 months later. And I wanted to add to the discussion. And so that was one of the challenges for me. Another challenge is that it's really important the book that you pick. I loved this book. However, I felt like it was focused on the type of short workshops or one and done type of workshops. And if you do a full blown course, or maybe a 10-week online course, or maybe a 3-day course, I would just love to see a little more about making connections and developing trust over a longer period of time. And I know that's about the book, not the format, but that was my experience with it.
Thanks, Peggy. Yeah, does anyone want to add to like what other challenges did you feel or notice with the book club format?
I think I would add almost the opposite problem that Peggy was experiencing, where Peggy, you were able to read the book in 2 days. And I found that I was really stressing to make sure that I could read that chapter before the next meeting. So you're so right that the Propel staff have a wide variety of other job duties or responsibilities and things like that. And so for me, sometimes I was really trying hard to make sure that I could get the chapter read the day or two before so that I could be ready for the meeting. Obviously that wasn't the case for everybody, but it did make me appreciate the fact that we really were just doing one chapter a month.
I was just gonna say I had the same. Sometimes I was reading, like, that morning trying to finish this chapter. But I also wanted to say, just having that specific meeting time, I think, is always a challenge, and I think there were people who wanted to be in the group who couldn't be in, who started, but then they couldn't do the time, and so there's always that challenge, but like Jamie mentioned, we had the notes so at least people could see what we were talking about. But maybe the time needs to vary. I don't know how to confront that challenge.
Yeah, so just to add to what Carrie was saying, we decided on like early Friday afternoons because usually Fridays are light. The problem with that is that everyone thinks the same thing. So like everything that is extra or needs to get done that isn't always regularly scheduled, it's added on Fridays and then your Fridays just end up being a new Monday. So that was a problem. Unfortunately, like Carrie said, there were some people who originally signed up, but then they just couldn't participate for the timing reason and schedule changes, unfortunately, because I feel like we could have really valued additional input because there's so many different voices and experiences at Propel. It's always wonderful to hear. I would also add that I'm like super impatient. So that's my challenge with the book club of like, I just wanted to be done with the book already, but it took like a year. It doesn't usually take me a year to read a book unless it's like super dense. But at the same time, I also understand that in our discussions, we also went back and forth. So we would talk about a previous chapter or a discussion and compare it. And that actually helped strengthen a lot of the ideas and reinforced the skills and knowledge that because we talked about it for a longer period of time. And I remember, which is, as we're all educators, we know that that's how people learn. Sometimes it's easy to forget for yourself. So, were there parts of the book that surprised you or that seemed unworkable? How, if at all, was this resolved during book group discussions?
The thing that surprised me was, and I looked back and I found my note on page 198, was a spirit very specific and a small thing, but the amount of time that the professionals that wrote this book and professional providers of learning, how much time they put into something like this. I feel strongly that what these ladies presented in this book is really good. I think a lot of work should be done before the event is presented. I think the content should be less, the process time should be more. There's so many ideas that are there. There should be follow up. There should be all kinds of things. I remember reading through this book and that one part, and I thought, oh my God, how much time do we have? For myself, 10 years in this organization, I've produced a lot of webinars. And then I look at a webinar that comes from Burlington English or something, right? And I imagine those people that put that together had worked full time on it for a couple of weeks. And I think, well, that's better than mine. But then I think, well, we don't have that time to do that. I don't know the answer for that. But I did think about the answer along the way. And I realized that, working together, we have a whole lot of talent in this group. When there's a need, I can ask questions. I can do a lot of things. I can find out things. I can get help easily in this group. So that was a surprise for me. Another thing is the overall the content of this book. I mean, the psychology of all the different kinds of people that we might reach. There were controversial topics, in my opinion, controversial. That one part of the book said that we need to be careful of all the different identities in the classroom, and I questioned how am I supposed to know the identity of everyone in the classroom and respond to them. Sometimes the responses that they mentioned, the things that I need to do, I had a hard time defining exactly. And overall, there's so much in this book that I don't think with the time that we had, we didn't get to everything. That for me was surprising, and I didn't know how to deal with that exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you. Did anyone else have anything to comment or respond to Don's before we move on, or your own answer to this question?
Just in response to what Don just said about how there was so much that we didn't get to. This is going to be like a book that I go back to all the time because there's so much valuable in it. And so it's going to live on my desk. And again, like that follow up, how important that is for learning. That's something I'm going to do myself. But I wonder, maybe we could do, Peggy, there's that word reunion. Maybe we can do a reunion and see how we can follow up. We did do projects, which I think we'll talk about, but we can always follow up on those.
One thing that surprised me was the parts of the book that went deeper into things like types of power and the chapter about repairing harms and stuff like that. Like, I honestly didn't expect that to be in the book because I guess I thought it was going to be more like designing instruction and adult learning theory principles and stuff like that. So I was like pleasantly surprised to see that it went into some, to me, what feels like deeper stuff, like especially like the decolonizing emotions and societal concerns or like factors, like things to think about when you're presenting or facilitating. And so, yeah, that was surprising for me. And I liked it because it was stuff that you don't always hear at conferences. Like sometimes there are a couple of sessions at conferences that touch on things like that. Like I went to one pre-conference at COABE that was, I think it was a whole day about radical andragogy. But aside from that, like I haven't seen a lot of professional learning around the ideas of like power and like, repairing harms when you've done something unintentionally that made someone feel harmed, you know. So
I agree, Nina. I was pleasantly surprised to see, like the psychological safety part included and those things about power and privilege. And it was really refreshing for me. I mean, I did a 2 years master's degree in instructional design, and I do not recall in all the textbooks, everything, white papers I read, seeing that, unless again it was a special like topics class or something. It wasn't presented as part of the overall instructional design or things that we need to look at and prepare for in working with all kinds of people. So I was really happy to see that it was included in this book.
Like I said, I was happy and it was powerful and it was super interesting. I thought, and also sad because I thought, why is there a power struggle? I'm here to do, and you guys have all experienced. I've experienced times when you're doing your best to present to something, and there's pushback from somebody, or there's somebody not there, or not prepared, or not giving you the space that you need, or whatever. I thought it was very realistic. But it was almost office politics. It was like, do we have to do that? I so wish we didn't. But, realistically, Peggy, you travel all over the country. I've traveled different places and done things, presentations, and sometimes people couldn't be sweeter to you, welcome you with open arms, and other people think you're tromping on their power. And or I don't know what the deal was, but maybe they just didn't like me as a person. I don't know, but very realistic. And what does Jamie always say? Technology is great, until it isn't. Meaning, when we're in Dallas and we're presenting and the building starts swaying because the wind's blowing so much, well, it's hard to prepare for that exactly, but prepare for the unexpected and prepare for the principal or somebody to tell you you only have a half an hour when you plan for 2 hours, whatever. I thought it was powerful and sad.
I think that I would just add one last thing to that because I absolutely agree with all of that. And for me, having to think reflectively on my own practice and my own PD offerings over the years and go, yes, this is how I could have improved what I did. There's discomfort in that. We all experience that. And this book was really good about making you face that discomfort in a way. And one thing that I really appreciated about this book group experience was that we could have those hard conversations with each other and still be supportive of each other, because some of those chapters were pretty intense, and we're focusing on those uncomfortable aspects of providing PD when things, like Don, like you said, when things go wrong, or when there's pushback. And we always want to think that our PD is going to be the best thing, that is the most life-changing for every participant that, crosses our doors. And we want that. That's what we want. We always hope for that. And that's just not always the case. And so it was a really wonderful and valuable experience to be able to talk frankly with each other about that, share some of our horror stories even, and to support each other in that, and to learn from each other in that as well.
I also think that not only in terms of like power and privilege and being inclusive with people, there was that whole chapter about when people are mandated and angry about being mandated to be in some kind of training or course or whatever, and how to work around that, which I thought was really, really good.
Thank you all. This actually, a lot of these answers are kind of bleeding into my next question, which was, did the book help you in your practice? And give one example. And I wanted to add, so one thing that this book really did give me was that really reflective practice that we see in different formats. And they had this exercise called the 5 whys. And I actually used that for book club, and I used it for a few other of my projects, where you write down whatever that is, for example, like, why a professional learning book club? And then you just answer that question. You just keep questioning, like 5 whys. So what it does, it kind of forces you, like, to really reconsider your own reasoning. I feel like that really helped me a lot. Even though, like, reflective practice is such a big thing, it's literally a best practice. But in that way, I haven't done it before, of just why, like like an annoying toddler or something. But it helped me break down and reinforce why I do what I do. And that was just such a simple exercise that anyone can do with a writing instrument. You could do it in pencil paper, you could do it in a notes page on your computer. Like, it's so simple.
For me, the timing worked out perfectly, and this specific book was perfect because it was my first full year as Propel coordinator. So I was able to apply what I was learning kind of along the way over the course of the year, which was really nice. So I used the planning section for a multi-day meeting that I facilitated last year, and like that what, why, how agenda, which goes back to what Natty was saying about that importance of the why. Why are we doing these things? And then just piggybacking on what you were talking about before, it really has made me pay special attention to those areas like the power and especially psychological safety, which I think all of these are related, but psychological safety and emotion, because if that doesn't exist, there's no learning. Learning is not going to happen if there's not that psychological safety. So I really try to make sure that exists. And then same, it's really helpful to use this kind of a book for reflection. And also, to me, it validates that professional learning, to look at it as a whole. It's a whole field. Professional learning for adults is a big field. It's not just some quick thing we do here and there. There's reasons we do the things we do, and there's processes and all of that. And even though reflective practice is definitely best practice, I think it's one of those things that gets skipped the most often. Just like a wrap up at the end, having reflection in a session gets skipped the most often, and it's so important. So it helped me a lot this over the past year. And I was in that year long was really great because I could apply these different aspects over the course of the year.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in?
I think I'll piggyback off of Carrie, because you mentioned the what, why, how agenda. And I had the opportunity to use that when I did the revamped student ambassador training in February. There were, as many of you all have mentioned, a lot of resources in this book, a ton of resources. And that what, why, how agenda template, it wasn't just helpful for the participants in that, yes, they could see what is happening? Why are we doing this? How are we going to do this? But in just creating that agenda, it helped me to really dig deep into that. It was a 3-day training. So it was a big learning experience that I was having to facilitate. And so it really helped me to plan in a deeper way and to think about each part of that training in a deeper way. And I do think that really helped improve and increase the quality of that training from prior years.
Does anyone else have any examples of how reading this book helped you in your practice?
I was in the midst of writing what began as a single course called ESL Foundations for new or new to the field instructors in New Mexico, and it turned into 3 courses along the last year. And I can't help but think about some of the fundamentals from this book, affected us in a way, Rebecca and I, that we made sure that we put those things in the course. I know that in the book we talk about less is more, less content, more time to process. I think we did a good job in our course of putting in a variety of ways where an instructor can process, write about, or even speak about, or record, or a variety of things in a way that transfers knowledge for them. I hope, and I think also we made choices. I think we gave some power to people that were taking the course to choose their own ways that they could demonstrate their capture of the knowledge. What did they gain? How did they gain? How did it work for them, etc. I think some of those things came from that book. I'm sure there's others I can't think of right now, but it was, for me, it was a good timing for me to be involved with this book while I was writing that course.
I'll go next. I feel like I'm still digesting all of it, but yeah, so I feel like I'm digesting all of it, so I don't know exactly if I have an example yet, but I am thinking about the part of the book where I forget which chapter, but where they talk about how do you as a presenter or facilitator want to feel at the end of the session or workshop, and then also how do you want participants to feel at the end? So that's something that I hadn't thought about before, and so that's just been on my mind. And Rebecca and I are presenting for new IET instructors in September. And I'm also going to be presenting or facilitating another workshop. So yeah, I kind of have those things in my mind, like how do I want to feel and how do I want the participants to feel too. So, and I liked that they had a list of like emotions in the back of the book, like in the appendix. And that just kinda, like, broadened my thinking, like, "Oh, yeah, right, I can, like, say, I wanna feel excited and, like, fulfilled and passionate or just, like, enthusiastic or silly." I don't know, but probably not silly, but maybe, you never know. Like, I just liked how they had that. I don't know, I guess it goes back to psychological safety, but, like, embracing emotions, and it goes back to what they said, like, PD can be a party, like, how do you want people to feel at a party? You want them to feel safe and accepted and engaged. And so I don't know, that's just like kind of maybe like the takeaways is kind of like broadened my scope of how I'm thinking about professional learning.
So I think in coaching, it can be a real culture change or culture shift. And that many people I've heard over and over and over, this is really transformational. It's a new way to think about my students, think about my place with my students. And yes, and it is. Yet I don't feel like it's a training that you go to or a course and then put the binder on the shelf and it gets dusty and you never think about it again. However, it can't be a one and done. And so we have, and many of us in Propel have attempted to create these community practices, and it's a challenge to keep bringing people back together and to build on. And so this book really helped me to think about it in different ways. And so usually when I'm going to speak at a conference, it'll be like kind of like a recruitment. this is what coaching is. This is how our course is and blah, blah, blah. And this year, with the help of Nina, as we were talking about it, we've decided to do a type of reunion where I can hopefully bring in a bunch of people that have been through this course over the years and talk about the good, bad, and ugly in implementing this culture shift. And it also made me think about how to spread it, because it can be difficult for one person from an organization to come to a course and then go back and try to implement these different ways of doing things. And so what I've been thinking about and preparing for, hopefully, is to bring everyone back and start recruiting others who can actually train in their organization. Because it doesn't have to be everybody join together, come to this place and all learn together, or just being online, but to really help people in their organization, help train other people in their organization in this philosophy and in some of these strategies. So it kind of sounds like I'm working myself out of a job, and that's really kind of what I want to do. I want to step back and just watch it grow and spread. So that really helped. That's what I was thinking about the whole time I was reading that book. And now we have a tool to train your trainers, right? Because we can't just expect people to have these skills. These skills are taught. Being an effective facilitator is a skill, and skills are taught. There can be innate qualities that make you a good facilitator. However, there's a lot to it. And so a lot of times we throw people, oh, you're great. You would be good at this other job. You can be the supervisor now, but we haven't trained them to be a supervisor. But I digress. But this book, I think, would be a great basis to do a train the trainer, not just the content of the actual course, but all these things on how to facilitate.
I got a shout out for the Propel newsletter. Thank you, Nadia. In there, we see that one of our focuses for this year is the train the trainer. Exactly. How can we get people in each program working to do better without us, right? Like you said, Betty, putting ourselves out of a job. That's okay. We have other things we can do. We can work on other things. If everybody's good, we got stuff we can do. That's okay. It was a really good point.
I don't think a train the trainer replaces us. I think it adds to the pool. I want to just add, I'm not worried about that. But that is exciting to give opportunity for others to have that say in their learning. I think that's like really the biggest thing, more than just not necessarily putting us to have a job, but like you're in control of your learning. You have a say in it. And I think that's an andragogical principle, which sometimes we tend to forget that one, but that's really important. Yeah, so I want to transition just to after we read the book, after our book club, we finished the chapters, we were winding down our discussions, and we were really considering transfer of learning. So transfer of learning, just for those who haven't heard that term necessarily, is what it basically means when people apply information and strategies and skills they learned into a new situation or context. So that's actually a really big marker of learning. A proof of learning is if you could take something you learned and apply it to multiple contexts and not just A to B. And I think from a student perspective example, it would be a student learns operations with fractions, and then they can bake, right? So understanding those measurements and being able to cut them or add to them, but keeping that same sort of ratio, right? As opposed to only knowing how to use operations for a test, right? So it's taking that knowledge, applying it elsewhere. So that's just an example that I fall back on because I did not prep that example for transfer of learning. But essentially, transfer of learning is very vital to what we do, especially as professional learning practitioners. Is that our goals are for people to be able to build off those same skills that we teach them, for multiple contexts. So does anyone want to go first? And what was your transfer of learning? What was your, essentially, how did you use this at like after book club?
For me, it tied in with about the time that presentations were being asked for our annual conference in September. And I thought, hey, now I know so much stuff. I can do the best presentation that's ever been done, and everybody's going to be screaming and yelling and having fun, and dancing around. So that's what I planned. And I was lucky enough to get accepted to present at NMAS. So I can't wait. I have all kinds of stuff planned there, which involves very little of me and a whole bunch of everybody who's there sharing what they know, asking what they need, figuring out, learning what works best. If I can guide some people into, some light bulb coming on where an answer's been, they've figured out something with someone's help, or something has been confirmed for them by others. That's my hope in that group. So it inspired me quite a bit for that. So I can't wait for September to come around and us to have that conference.
I thought it was such a good idea. I can't remember whose idea it was, but we talked about it from the beginning. So it was part of the structure of the book club that we all do some sort of a project with what we learned. And I was really happy that I did a collaborative one with Rebecca. And what a longtime goal is that we've had is to get more diverse presenters presenting at the conference, and people who are practicing adult, their teachers, their staff, whoever, but that don't traditionally present. We want to encourage them and maybe help with confidence and talk about the process and things like that. So we facilitated a session called "So You're Thinking About Presenting," and during the session we focused on that process, like choosing a topic and a format, planning and organizing, interactive delivery, and so on. But what we tried to do is infuse the 7 habits for facilitators that are in the book within the session. I'm just going to name them real quick because I'm looking at a birthday cake. Speaking of party, by the way, party stands for purpose, audience, routines, technique, and you. And the 7 habits are: determine purpose, anchor in adult learning, engage emotions, navigate power, design intentionally, attend to details, and very important, last one, facilitate adaptively. So with our kind of tips and tools that we provided for people who attended that session, we interwove these habits in there. And then we also allowed time for challenges and concerns because people who attended or people who hadn't really presented before. And what I'd really like to do is repeat this kind of a session and also make sure the planning handouts and resources that we came up with are available to everyone, just as a standalone as well. So that was our project that we did. And I'm so glad we did. At first I was like, oh gosh, we're going to do a project. This is going to be a big thing. But it was really good to be able to think about different ways we could use what we learned in the book to even further affect what we do. And also bring it to a larger audience.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent. So my action plan was twofold. One was to write in a blog post. So I do the Propel newsletter, and I do one of the 2 blog posts that are included in there, thoughts on professional learning, and I wrote about the just reflection on the book club, as well as a starting template that Jamie mentioned earlier of how to jumpstart your own book club at your organization. So kind of also what Peggy and Don were mentioning earlier about like giving programs that opportunity to do their own professional learning. Another one was also using a different format of just talking about book club in general, which is this podcast episode. So those were my 2 projects of taking what I got out of book club and then reflecting and creating something, that template, and then also talking about that too. So giving that out. So it's just another shout out of what I learned being in book club. Does anyone else want to talk about their action plans?
I'll talk about mine really quickly. So Emily and I, our project or action plan is a presenter toolkit. I think Emily's done more work on it so far than I have, but I think it's a work in progress. And basically it's just, I mean, it kind of goes with the say you want to present, but it's more like the nuts and bolts, like logistics, just like comprehensive. What do you need to like keep track of and have ready to go? And like thinking about the things that you might forget about that like still really contribute to the participants' experience, like before they even go to your session. That's what they talked about in the book. Like, they had this anecdote of somebody shows up to the school and it's confusing which door they're supposed to go into, and then they're waiting, and all those things like leading up to the session, not just in the session. And also like for you as a presenter facilitator to feel like you're ready to go, and you have things in place that you need to. So
Right. Thanks for bringing up that anecdote, because what it did was illustrate what it looks like from the other side of things. So, like, if participant going to your session doesn't have the right time, was given conflicting information, was responded to in these ways by the presenters for being late or going in the wrong place, right? It kind of put us in a place of like, oh, maybe we should really think about this from a different perspective, because by default we think of it as our own perspective as professional developers of this is the content that we need to develop and facilitate, and this is what we have to create, and the whatever administrative stuff you have to do ahead of time. But thinking of it of like what could go wrong and what that could look like for a participant and how that affects their learning is so vital. Jamie, did you want to share your action plan?
Yes, absolutely. So primarily, what I do with professional learning is work with the students, student ambassadors, and student leadership. And so, what kind of came as an organic conversation about just how to maintain community and connection among the student ambassadors as they go through their year of serving, we decided that we were going to do our own book group. So we decided to read the book The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And right now we've had 3 so far, but we every month meet and we discuss 2 chapters. They're significantly shorter than the chapters in the PD book. So we discuss 2 chapters every month, and this really focuses on self-care and the way that you can choose to interact with other people in a way that brings you personal peace and happiness, despite how someone else may act, react, think, or feel of you. So this is a very qualitative and holistic, not having to do with advocacy or student ambassadorship, but as a self-improvement tool and a way for us to connect and reflect together and keep that connection with each other. And so, yeah, so far it's been going very well, and I definitely look forward to continuing with that this year.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just also like some of these action plans have already completed, some are still in process. Technically, this recording is still in process, but by the time you guys hear it at home, it's going to be done. So, yeah, and some haven't, if I'm not mistaken, haven't really started yet. But the goal really was more about how can we take this learning and keep going with it and keep using it. And I feel like that is really a goal for this kind of book club. And I am just so ecstatic about how what everyone came up with and how they grew, and we could see all that growth through these conversations over time that we had together, and we really got to know each other as a team in a really different way than we have before. I believe that was said before, but it was just to reiterate how it was just such a unique opportunity to spend this amount of time with our team in a very different way. So our final question, is a book club a good option for professional learning, and why or why not? And I would love for someone else to go first before me.
I can go. My answer is absolutely. With one tiny caveat, and Peggy mentioned this before, that the what the book is so important because it needs to be chosen really carefully. And so for our next book group, we voted because it needs to be something that all the participants can gain from and be able to implement in some way in their work. So that just the book is so important. But it is so nice to have something different that's focused on both the gaining of knowledge and then that discussion that everyone's saying how nice it was to be able to discuss with colleagues and get to know each other in different ways. And also that just the nature of the book club, the ongoing nature of it, how informal it was and flexibility, those were all just great alternatives to a traditional kind of professional development or learning. So I look forward to the next one.
And, I will add to what you were saying, Carrie. I agree with you. I think that a book group is a very effective, or can be a very effective means of professional learning. One other thing to keep in mind, besides the book that you choose, which is so essential, is just knowing that this is going to be a long-term project. It took us about a year. And so if you or your staff, if you want your program to engage in a book group as a professional learning initiative, just keep that in mind. It's not something that's quick, and it shouldn't be. It's not meant to be. The whole structure of it is that it is long term. And, Peggy, I believe you had mentioned this before. It's something you come back to. It's something that you can keep reflecting on even after it is done. So just one other thing to keep in mind. But even that in and of itself, I think, is effective and beneficial.
I also think that it's a different way to work together and get to know each other and connect as a staff, whether we're across the state or in one organization, because it just seems like to me, like whenever we have meetings or get together, there's like an agenda. You got to move through quickly. You got to make all these different decisions. And this is kind of like a no pressure type of connection. And I really got to know a lot of you a lot more than I did before. And I think I already mentioned this. People can feel really isolated, and this really helped for me connect with my colleagues. And also, our business is education, so it really helps foster a love for lifelong learning.
Thank you for that. Especially since we're educators, we should be lifelong learners, but you'd be surprised. So I just wanted to say, echoing a little bit of what my colleague said, professional learning book club is interesting and unique, and it can be really effective type of professional learning, but there's a lot to consider. And one of the things to consider also is just the vibe of the group too. If your group cannot get along, or it does or has a lot of tension, then your book club's just going to be torture. You're probably not going to learn much. And it's not always great for that kind of, what I would call sort of like almost compliance learning. So, for example, of really knowing the nuts and bolts of how to do your job. Like, that is not what this format is for. I think for professional learning, there's so many different options and modalities beyond going to conferences or attending webinars. So we're always keeping in mind, what is this beneficial, what is this effective for, and exactly what Peggy mentioned of like really great team building. It does, what Jamie said, it does take a long time. However, you're all this time thinking about your role and what you're learning and how that works together and how you can expand on that. And those kinds of questions and thought processes is going to take a long time. There's no way around it. You can't be transformative in a very short moment. But I really do hope that this kind of little project is adapted by other programs. And we would love to hear from you. If any program actually does a book club, reach out. Tell me about it. Do a podcast episode with us about it. It's great. I think adult educators, we don't always get that opportunity to just learn about our own field. We just do. And by reading together and reading about teaching adults and training adults and working with adults, that I think that really strengthened and honed our skills. And there's also a lot of passion in the book. Like, the authors clearly cared about what they did. And that helped us. I mean, we all know that we care about what we do, but it also, like, we were able to voice that together. And it was just a wonderful experience overall. And I want to thank all of you, Dawn, Nina, Carrie, Peggy, Jamie, for being here today and talking about this project and how it affected you and what your thoughts are. And I also want to extend that thanks for those who couldn't be here, but everyone participated in some small way. And also, like, our team is really wonderful. And I feel so lucky to be a part of this organization and this project.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for sharing with us. And please always come back. We would love to do more episodes. You got an idea? Reach out to me and Jamie. We'll work with it. So that's all, folks.
Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.